Well, folks, thanks again for joining us and joining the increasing number of people who are tuning in to Stockwell Day at Day-to-Day News. We appreciate that. We need the support. We look for it. Thanks for your comments. Also, a lot of great stuff we're looking at today. Everything from budgets to bombs to beauty tips to stuff that's going on in Hollywood. So stay tuned here. We're going to look at the fact, first of all, that right now in Canada, there's a strong possibility, as some people are saying, that the government might fall. The government needs to pass its budget, and in Canada, it needs to have a majority of votes in the House of Commons because the present Liberal government is not a majority government. It has to rely on a little help from their friends, and we're about to find out who their friends are. Now, the Conservative opposition under Opposition Leader Pierre Poilievre has indicated they are not going to support the budget. The magic number of seats or votes that the government needs is 172, or else they fall. So they're going to have to get some votes from the Socialist Party, or possibly some from what's called the Bloc Party in Quebec, which is a sovereigntist, separatist party. Now, the Bloc in Quebec have said there's no way they're voting to support, and the Conservatives said there's no way they're voting to support. All eyes are going to be on the Socialist Party, the NDP. Now, some of them might abstain. You might get a couple of abstentions. My personal bet on this is that the government is not going to fall. They haven't been in office all that long. Parliament will risk, and politicians will risk, that people will say, why are you calling another election so quickly? Give us a break. So my thinking is, in fact, it's not going to fall. I could be wrong, so let's watch. Let's see what happens. You know, one thing I recommended today, and I've posted on this, there's a book out called The Wealthy Barber. Some of you may remember this book. It was actually written almost a generation ago the first time. The concept was a barber who was giving advice to a friend of his about investing, and that became a huge bestseller, certainly in Canada, and was very well done around the other parts of the globe. And the second edition, or the updated edition, ostensibly being written for Gen Z and the younger generation. What I've done today, I've posted and recommended, and I don't get any royalties for this, unfortunately. I guess I should have checked to see if I could. I've recommended that our government, as a matter of fact, that most governments, the Prime Minister or maybe presidents, take a look, have all their ministers read the book, because it talks about some of the basic realities of fiscal life that apply to us as citizens, whether running a business or running our homes, and some what we would think is common sense stuff to keep from bankruptcy. And what I've said and what I posted today to our Prime Minister is, read the book, get a copy for your ministers, remind yourselves about some of the basics, and somehow keep Canada from going off the cliff economically, because with the federal Liberals' approach to doing things like redefining debt, redefining what deficit is, clouding the numbers, not having a substantial plan to get rid of the increasing debt and deficit, we're headed to not a happy place economically. Read the book, The Wealthy Barber. It might actually help. The other thing that our Prime Minister in Canada is doing is his visit to the UAE, the United Arab Emirates. Now, I've been challenging for a couple days, and I'm saying it again today. Would you please, Prime Minister, would you please bring forward to the Islamic leaders of the UAE the fact that Islamist terrorist groups are causing horrific genocidal heartbreak and destruction in places like Somalia and in places like Sudan. It's not just Sudan, it's happening in other countries. In places like Nigeria, where Christians are being slaughtered, young girls are being taken captive, babies are being killed. I'm going to run some names by you as you're listening right now. What do all these names have in common? Because media will mention these names from time to time because they're so complicit in genocidal torture and inhuman activity. So you've heard of ISIS, you've heard Al-Qaeda, you've heard Taliban. How about Al-Shabaab? How about Hezbollah? How about Hamas? How about Daesh? All of those, what do they have in common? They are all Islamist groups. They all operate in Islamist nations. They are all extremists. Am I saying that all extremists and terrorists like this are Muslim? No, not at all. but these particular groups are all Muslim. And the other thing that you hear in common is that not only do their own governments in the countries in which they act define them as Islamist, they might say they're terrorist, or they might say this or that, but Western governments, governments in Canada, governments around the world, democratic governments, leaders are afraid to attach the word Islamist to each one of those group names that I just said to you. Why are we afraid? Why do we sit in terror about using the word Islamist, attaching it to these terror groups whose number one claim is that they are followers of Islam, of all of the things that we know about Islamist terrorist writings? Western leaders, government leaders, terrified to mention that name. Why is that? Contrast that with, it's been a few years now, but you recall a number of years ago, there was a couple incidents where people who were identifying as Christians and also as anti-abortion actually were out, and there were a couple of cases where abortion doctors were actually threatened or in fact killed. People shot them. People who called themselves Christian and who said they were anti-abortion. And when that happened, in every case, almost every Christian denomination that you can imagine spoke out very clearly to these people who were calling themselves anti-abortion and Christians also. And almost every denomination, every pastor, every priest, every reverend was saying unequivocally, this is wrong. Murder is wrong. It's wrong to shoot people. It's wrong to shoot anyone. It's wrong to be shooting doctors. But you don't have that same denunciation across the board around the world when you have these Islamist terror groups causing the most horrific death, destruction, genocide, rape, capture, torture. We need to hear, as much as we need to hear non-Islamic country leaders speaking up against and using the word Islamist, we need to hear Islamist country leaders openly condemning extreme Islamist terrorism. Now, there's a group, and we've identified and worked with a group, full credit to people in Canada, people like those at Secure Canada, people like Cheryl Sapiria and others who have worked with a group called the Imams Council. And these imams are willing and have spoken out against these atrocities, but very few and far between. And of course, good old, wonderful mainstream media rarely reports on them. So come on, media, wake up, smarten up, at least explain to us why you don't like to use that term. In Manitoba, which is a socialist government right now, and it has a First Nations Indigenous premier, very interesting that he has taken a step in dealing with drug-related crime, same step as a conservative premier in Canada, Premier of Alberta, Danielle Smith. They both have brought in legislation to make it available to authorities to involuntarily deal with incarcerating severe drug-using addicts. And we've got the usual cry of anger and fear from the so-called rights groups. Now, I have a bit of a concern. I will say this: habeas corpus is that part of law which says to all police forces, to any government, you can only hold somebody for 24 hours before you actually charge them. That goes all the way back to the Magna Carta. And I am a fierce defender of habeas corpus. There are and there can be times when a severe, completely out of control addict needs to be kept in care or incarcerated for more than 24 hours so that they're not out either killing themselves or killing other people. So based on that narrow definition, I support this concept of involuntary incarceration in some of these very rare cases. Now, the people who are opposed to that say, well, you know, they might accidentally arrest a person who's just mentally incognitive. They might arrest some person who's got a mental condition of some kind. it's possible that that might happen. But courts are increasingly not doing what they need to do in terms of apprehending people, because they go to the extreme example, well, what if? And it's good to be concerned about that. The courts recently, in their, frankly, insane ruling on two cases, two men who were absolutely proven guilty of pornography related to children, in some cases very young children, in some cases infants. And these two people, thousands and thousands of photos and videos in their possession, and even possible involvement themselves. And the former Harper government had put in at least a mandatory minimum in cases like this, 1 year, at least 1 year in jail. And the court has said, no, that's too mean, that's too harsh. And they based it on the fact that, what if you had a case where an 18-year-old guy and his 17-year-old girlfriend, because she's 17, so she's effectively legally still a child, were caught, and that guy was caught with pictures of his girlfriend, even that she might have willingly, unfortunately, agreed to. And so what the courts are increasingly doing, is taking the extreme, rare possibility that something might happen. And look, if a case like that happened and it came before a judge, judges would make the accommodation necessary. But increasingly, we are looking at the possibility of something very rare happening and letting violent, sometimes, and egregious individuals, letting them go free. So judges, smarten up on this one. Let these things go through. If those tiny exceptions ever come up, they can be dealt with. But we need to, you're going to see judges opposing the First Nations premier of Socialist NDP. You're going to see opposing, and he's only asking that they can hold these extremely out of control addicts for 72 hours, give them time to at least get off that drug, and not actually 72 hours, they can be put into a provincial incarceration facility, and we get them out of the hospital. So smarten up, judges, and people are getting upset, and we don't want to see people upset with the judiciary. They are clearly a vital part of our democracy. So as we look at situations like that, the other thing that's being considered right now, and something that's catching attention and has been for a while across Canada, is the fact that the leader of the opposition, the official Conservative opposition, Pierre Poilievre, is just, there isn't a day goes by when mainstream media doesn't just harass him and harangue him on things, all to do with style. They refuse to address the policies and principles he's talking about, which could save the country from going into a recession, let alone a depression. And so within the ranks of the Conservatives, we hear continued, people are upset. They're saying they want to change. Most don't want to change, but many are. The media magnifies this. And I want people to picture that if, in fact, the Conservatives got rid of Pierre Poilievre and brought in somebody else, guess what? If that person, the new person, is a true conservative, has real conservative principles, mainstream media sees any true conservatives as a threat to society. That's actually how they see it. Mainstream media views this through a culturally Marxist lens, and that anybody who would say anything about the state is probably harmful to the state and must be eliminated. So guess what? Media will attack the new person, if there is one. They'll give it a little bit of time, and then they start the attack, same as the other one. And the cycle repeats. And conservatives have a wonderful way of shooting their own, shooting the wounded. On the left-leaning, on the liberal side, and the socialist side, they think collectively more so than conservatives do. Small c conservatives think of individual rights first, and therefore individuals. But make no mistake about it, conservatives, if you're thinking of getting rid of Pierre Poilievre, the next person is going to face the same type of fire from mainstream media, and there you're going to be going around the same circle. Let's focus on the principles. I just talked to somebody in the United States, and they were apologizing to me for President Trump. I said, you know what? I have never in my life voted based on personality. I vote on the principles and the policies that the person's talking about. And if those principles and policies are going to make life safer and more flourishing and more prosperous for me and my family, that person's going to get my vote. If they're talking about policies that make life riskier, more dangerous, and put our economic well-being at threat, I'm not voting for them. Folks, wake up. Look at the policies and the principles that people are talking about, and don't fall into this game that the media, just because they hate, I'll use the word hate, media hates small c conservatives who are prepared to stand on small c conservative principles. So let's keep focused on that and stop this business of always shooting ourselves and shooting our leaders before they have a chance to govern and to prove what they've got. In the U.S., talking about leaders, been a bit of a dramatic move. Some are calling this a dramatic shift, where President Trump is saying, release those Epstein reports, release everything, all the files, whatever's there, let it out, let it be public. That surprised some people because the Democrats, there's not too many things that they have right now that they can really go after Trump on in terms of this type of thing. Trust me, folks, if there was something about implicating Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein on these sexual cases, trust me, the Democrats would have brought that out a long time ago. I am convinced there is nothing there. There's all kinds of reasons to be reluctant. Once these files get released, and maybe that's what should happen, everybody who's ever talked to Epstein, everybody who's been at a dinner with him, all the names are going to be there. Everybody's going to be suspect, and that's why, quite rightly, you don't always just release all the files. But Donald Trump has had it, and he said, let all the files out, let them go. So we'll see it in the House of Representatives. First of all, there will be a vote, then it goes on to the Senate. But trust me, folks, don't sit on the edge of your chair thinking there's going to be great smoking guns somewhere about Trump with young women. Matter of fact, there have been cases now where, it's been there a long time, where the young women, the focus and the center of this case, have said very clearly Trump was not involved with anything they ever saw. So let's see where it rolls out. Anyway, they're going to be released, and everybody will be watching that. And unfortunately, our eyes will be taken off some of the things that are happening that are of real importance. For instance, in Gaza, it's being reported that so many of the majority of school buildings have been destroyed. Kids are not going to school, and people are quite rightly demanding that funding be restored so that schools can be rebuilt, kids can go back to school. Look, I'm all for that, but our governments need to be clear. No funding, no involvement whatsoever from the UN Work Relief Agency. Their work relief agency is called UNRWA. UNRWA, remember that word? Now's the time to be calling your federal representative and saying very clearly, will you commit to not funding UNRWA because it is overrun with Hamas, it is overrun with Islamist theology, which is misogynist, which is hateful, which is prejudiced. Do not let UNRWA funding be involved in rebuilding these schools. Yes, schools should be rebuilt. Yes, kids need to be educated, but now's the time to put a stop to this. And Canada, so far, has not been tough on this. They need to make it very clear, no more funding for UNRWA. You know, we look at all of the things that grip us and the major issues which are very important that galvanize people today. In Toronto, Canada, there's a big issue going on in the city and people are up in arms. Guess what? There's a debate going on about whether you should be allowed to put your dog's droppings, yes, your dog poop, into a plastic bag and into the bin of somebody else's, on someone else's property, into your neighbor's garbage bin. Should you be able to do that? They want more laws. They're raging on this. Boy, if ever there was a case of an entitled public that has everything they could possibly want, and yet they're whining and crying about other things. But it's one big issue. I'm not saying it's the only issue in Toronto, but it's a big one that has grabbed people's attention. Should I be able to put that little bag of dog poop in my neighbor's bin? Frankly, I always lean to property rights, which in British Columbia, they seem to have totally rejected. I lean to say you should be able to protect your own bin. That's still your property. I don't think a neighbor should be able to walk into your house and say, I got to go to the bathroom. That's your property, and probably the same on the garbage bins, but it sure shows the things in our society that in a comfort society that grab our attention that other societies certainly don't have the luxury of doing. On the Hollywood scene, if you were glued to your television last night instead of to the Grey Cup win, the amazing Grey Cup win by the Saskatchewan Roughriders, and I know there's American fans who kind of like Canadian football, the fact that we only have 3 downs and a lot of other funny rules, but their Governor Awards were on. This is like a precursor, a pre-runner to the Academy Awards and the other awards things. Look, Hollywood is in full panic mode these days. They need these type of ceremonies with lots of glitter and glamour and beautifully dressed people, and that would include beautifully dressed women too. And they're trying to do this because Hollywood's in trouble. They're in trouble because there's many independent filmmakers that are cropping up everywhere. They're in trouble because AI can do entire movies, make entire movies with artificial intelligence. So they're promoting these big award ceremonies. The interesting thing in the ceremonies last night, so you had Leonardo DiCaprio out there, Jennifer Lawrence for sure, very well known. Also, Sydney Sweeny was there, looking as beautiful as always. And that shows a bit of a shift in Hollywood because, as you recall, it was not that long ago that she did that famous ad wearing those beautiful jeans and advertising for American Eagle. And because she made that terrible reference to the fact that the beauty is in the jeans, referring to her jeans and her great look, as you remember, that ignited a firestorm around the world as the woke world just attacked her for being racist and all of these other ridiculous things. And Sydney Sweeny did not cave, and neither did American Eagle. American Eagle stock, by the way, has gone up radically and improved in value. And so there she was, being fully accepted now at the Governor's Awards. Hollywood is saying, I guess you're okay, because she had the stamina and the courage to say, you know what, to say she was not racist and that these attacks were ridiculous. And guess what? The woke attackers have backed off, and she seems to be moving up in the world, especially with her new movie. Talking about these attacks from within Hollywood, we referenced this last week, referenced a couple times, Justin Baldoni and Blake Lively from suing each other. And remember, Blake Lively started the lawsuits by saying that Justin Baldoni, who had direction and director's powers in the movie, was deliberately constructing scenes so that he could do provocative stuff with her in these pretty hot scenes. She started suing him. He has countersued. The case itself has gone into the hundreds of millions of dollars. Why is this important? Well, it's important because it's showing that you can draw lines. People can draw lines, especially for women who are going into some of these sensitive roles. They can say, no, I don't have to do this, or I don't have to do that. But what's been amazing is it's found out on both sides, in both camps. Blake Lively being countersued by Justin Baldoni for some pretty nasty stuff she was up to on the set. So it's gotten pretty wild, going into the hundreds of millions of dollars in damages being claimed, and all of a sudden, Justin Baldoni, is he crying uncle? Or for those of you who are sexist, is he crying auntie? Whatever he's crying, he has filed for dismissal. He wants a dismissal of the activities as the costs keep mounting. Maybe it's going to bring this kind of a discussion to an end. Maybe it will bring an end to, if there are these regrettable liberties that are being taken on set. Anyway, we're going to find out. Remember, the name of the movie they're talking about they were in was It Ends With Us. I'd kind of like to see it end here. Kind of tired of reading about them. How about it ends with them? Have a great day, folks. We'll see you tomorrow. Thanks for tuning in.